In this chapter, I'm going to describe the relationship between mxml and ActionScript by accomplishing a single task with both languages. I'm going to be adding a very simple visual control to an application, first using an mxml declaration, and then using a little bit of ActionScript code instead. The goal is to help you see the relationship and differences between the languages and let you judge for yourself when to use each language in its context. If you're following along in the exercises, start off by closing the existing project, Chapter 01 Begin. You can always close a project by going to the Flex Navigator view, right-clicking on the project or control-clicking on the Mac, and selecting Close Project. When a project is closed, its files are still there on disk, but its applications won't be recompiled whenever you make changes to other applications you might also have open. Next, we'll import a project from the Exercises area. From the menu, select File, Import, Flex Project. In the Import Project From selection, choose Archive File, Browse, go to the folder that contains the video series exercises to the Chapter 02 directory, and select the file chapter02begin.zip and open it. And then click Finish in the Import Flex Project dialog box to open the project. With the project open, go to its source root and open the file mxml and actionscript.mxml. This is an empty starting application that only has a layout and a background color setting. Now we're going to add a label component using mxml code. Place the cursor between the application tags and put in an mxml label declaration. When you type in mxml manually in source view, notice that when you type in the less than character, you get a listing of all of the available ActionScript classes that can be declared in mxml. You can then start typing the name of the element you want to insert. I'm typing LA for label, and then I can press enter or double-click on the item in the list to select it. When you then press the spacebar, you'll see a listing of all of the available attributes of that element. I'll choose the text property, which is the property of the label control that determines what text will be displayed, and I'll put in the text created in mxml. I'll also put in a font size attribute of 14, and that means that the font will be 14 pixels high. I'll then save the changes and run the application, and you'll see that the application displays the label created in mxml. So far, so good. I'll close the browser and return to FlexBuilder. Now, how would you accomplish the same task using pure ActionScript? Well, first of all, ActionScript code, when incorporated into an application, is placed inside a script tag like this. I'm going to type in a less than character and then SC, and notice that I get to an element named mx:_script. I'll press enter, and then the greater than character, and FlexBuilder automatically fills in the end tag for the mxscript section and wraps inside it a CData block. Now let me speak very briefly about CData sections. CData stands for character data, and it's an XML construct that's designed to protect literal characters from being interpreted as XML. The XML architecture has 5 reserved characters that can only be included in XML if they're interpreted as aliases or entities. For instance, the ampersand character, if you're not inside a CData block, is represented like this, ampersand AMP semicolon. And the less than character is interpreted like this, ampersand LT semicolon. Now, why are these characters problems? Because in ActionScript code, the ampersand, the less than character, and many of the other characters are commonly used. And if you had to put them in literally in an XML structure, you would have to use these entities or aliases all the time. By wrapping your ActionScript code inside a CData block, that is a character data block, you protect those literal characters, and you can type in your ActionScript code in a pure version. Okay, back to the subject at hand. How do you create a label at runtime and add it to the application? Well, first of all, we're going to create a function that looks like this. Private function, and then we'll give the function a name of initApp. The name of the function really could be anything you wanted, but the name of the function initApp is a strong convention that's used by a lot of Flex developers as the name of the function that fires as the application starts up. This function will have a return data type of void. And then, to cause this function to be called as the application starts, I'll place my cursor inside the application tag, and I'll put in something called a creation complete event handler. The creation complete event is fired or dispatched by the application as the application starts up, and it's the most commonly used event to trigger startup code, that is application initialization code. To complete the event handler, in the creation complete attribute, I'll put in ActionScript code that calls the init app function. I'll type in init and press Control space to see a list of all available properties and functions that start with those characters. And then I'll choose init app by double-clicking. Now this function will fire as the application starts up. Now within the function, I'm going to construct an instance of the label control, like this. I'll declare a variable called myLabel, and I'll data type it as an instance of the label class. Notice that as I select that ActionScript class from the pull-down list of available classes, FlexBuilder automatically adds an import statement. I'll be speaking much more at length about import statements later on, but for now it's just important to know that the label class must be imported before it's referred to in ActionScript code. Now I'll initialize this variable by calling the label class's constructor method. The code looks like this. var mylabel:label equals new label. The label constructor method at the end of this statement is responsible for creating the instance of the class. Now I'll set its text property. When you set text properties in ActionScript, you just use simple dot syntax. So I'll put in the text property like this. mylabel.text equals created in ActionScript. I'll also set the font size. My goal here is to do exactly the same thing I did in mxml. Font size is a style, not a property. And if you want to modify a style, you do it through the setStyle method. The code will look like this. mylabel.setStyle. Then I'll pass in the name of the style I'm setting, font size as the first argument, and its new value as a number, 14, in the second argument. Finally, I'll take this new label object that I've created, and I'll add it as a child object to the current application. The code looks like this. This.addChild myLabel. When you call a Flex container's addChild method, you're adding the object that you pass in as an argument to what's called the display list of the container. An object can be created in memory, but if you haven't added it to a container's display list, it won't be visible. So these 4 lines of ActionScript code, declaring and constructing the label object, setting its text property, setting its font size style, and explicitly adding it to the application container as a child object, are the equivalent of a single line of mxml code at line 19 in my current application. I'll save the application and run it. By the way, I'm running the application now with the keyboard shortcut Control F11, and you'll be able to do the same thing in your copy of FlexBuilder. When I run the application, I now see both labels, the first created in mxml, the second created in ActionScript. Notice that the version created in XML is listed first. That's because mxml declarative code is executed before any of the ActionScript equivalent. If you wanted the label that was created in ActionScript to appear before the mxml created one, you could go back to the code and instead of the addChild method, which appends the object to the current display list, you could instead use a method called addChildAt, which allows you to add the object in a specific location in the container's display list. One more thing before we end this video. Within the source code of an application or of a custom component, this refers to the current instance of the current object or current class. So in the context of an application, this is pointing to the application, the addChild method is being called as a method of the application, and myLabel is the label object that's being generated and placed programmatically in the application's display list. So you can now see the difference between the two languages. mxml is much more concise in most circumstances, and it's doing exactly the same work as its underlying ActionScript code. It's just a lot faster and easier to code, and a lot more readable in many cases than the ActionScript equivalent.